I've done my postdoc study over the past many years, especially the last 2 years was designated to designing a management tracking tool for forestry, for environmental management in their plantations. And this study is basically combining that management checking tool with the species monitoring that's already taking place in their plantation. So we have this dual approach of monitoring environmental management, but then also monitoring the threatened species in them. And I'll explain everything by way of example. So and I welcome any and all comments and discussions afterwards. So just to run through a few premises, I think that's not supposed to look like that. Anyway, so we've got a social ecological system where people and humans, where people and nature interact all the time. And this is especially so in commercial forestry areas, where of course then have these timber production areas that also interact with the conservation corridors in between them. And then along with that, we as conservationists are interested in the state of the environment and where it's moving into the future. Tragically, this is the reality in many production landscapes, and we want to combat that. So, again, there are supposed to be people up there, but anyway. So, humans have either negative effects on the environment, which we call environmental pressures, or we can mitigate those negative pressures by effective management, and that's where I'll be focusing. So just very broadly, if you can intervene early in the degradation process, in other words, prevent degradation, you will normally follow a more proactive approach, will cost a bit less, and then the further down the longer you wait until you intervene, it's going to cost more. Because you will basically then repair damage. And both of these are, so invasive alien plant control would be repair. So it's a combination of these. So the environmental pressures in timber production landscapes there aren't many. The main ones are grazing, invasive alien plants, and then fire management. Then we consider the effects of these on wetlands and stream buffers. Soil erosion from your harvested commercial compartments and roads are an issue, and then environmental incidents are basically looking at things that happen, things that really are very wrong that happen, which we want to avoid. So I developed this weighted index of compliance. So we've got best practice, which we want to comply with, and then actual management in plantations. And I compared these two and calculated the weighted index of compliance for the different pressures. And you can see there that there's actually quite good management of the invasive alien plants and then also the roads and the harvested timber compartments. When you look at wetlands, it's like really very good. And also in the environmental incidents, they are largely in check. So, when they happen, they are mitigated very well. For fire, there are a few issues. So I use the 70% cutoff as, cause for concern, and then the livestock grazing issue is a very large concern, which I'll also talk to again later. So now I spoke to the management things. Now, yes, this is horrible. Okay. Now we are comparing the management things with the state and trends, looking at species, and the 2 and the U and the F were beautiful animals. Anyway, so using these indicator species, we want to see where we are along this degradation continuum, which we want to stop if possible. Ideally, we want environmental management to result in a status where we are now that is better or equal than the past. So looking along a timescale, and this is also the way that the ecological monitoring is set up, we want to find the same species or better, so that's the options, that's the goal, and that would be a frog. So Adrian Armstrong did this fantastic study, which I highly admire because he actually found what he was looking for. At Umtenzini Forest Lodge, he had historical sites. He went there, he went looking for the Pickersgill's reed frog. He found it, and he found it at another site, which is spectacular. So James Harvey, which is not too shabby either, he went to a historical site, he went back and back again, and he didn't find the frog. And it's not because James is really good. Then he expanded his search for this frog in the same plantation, going to another site, didn't find it in 2013, and then he went back in 2018, he found it. And this is largely because of a good rainfall here, so which illustrates that how the environmental variables influence what you see. So when we look at this critically endangered Nephofia species, which only occurs at one site in the country, at Langepan, we see that in 2012, David Stiles, which is not a too shabby ecologist either, he didn't find it. It was not there. Then in 2013, he found 30 individuals, okay, which is good, okay. It's not fantastic, but it's good. And this was largely as a result of fire. Remember, just pointing it out there, this example is specifically talking about the detectability of species. Okay, now we carry on. 2017, David Stiles went there again, and he found a few species, and then he reported that the forester actually found 200, which I thought was a bit far-fetched, but okay. And then I just spoke, and this is largely as a matter of timing. So David went to the site in November, which is when these plants are supposed to flower, and the forester was there a few weeks prior, whatever that may mean. So I would assume that it would be in October, and he found 200. Then I spoke to Lisa Shaw, and she recorded 600 this year, which is, again, a matter of timing. She went in October rather than November. Fire was burned in the prior year, and then they had some good rains in September. So we've got this trend, like lekker. But at the same time, we see a deterioration in ecosystem state. So you can't be fooled by trends that are influenced by detectability. Okay, so using the Ezenvelu protocol, they are seeing a decrease in plant diversity and also abundance, and an increase in weedy and ruderal species. And the main cause of this is uncontrolled livestock grazing, and they have management interventions. It's now a no grazing zone, so we're hoping that this will recover. But just at the same time, we know that fire is really important for this species, and fire management in this plantation is really spectacular. It's at 80% of best practice. So now we are going over to a plantation with a it was critically endangered. I think it's now endangered in the latest NBA map, KZN sandstone sourveld. And all of these species were recorded in that area. I mean, it's spectacular. It was in 2011. Again, there were supposed to be people. Land claim came through. Land was given back to the claimant. Mondi's leasing back the plantations from the claimant. And so no follow-up assessments were done. So we don't know where it's going. But now I should just say this specific gladiolus, I think it might, from what I know, it might be the largest population that we have in South Africa. The other ones have about 50 species, or 50 individuals, and David Stiles recorded here several hundred, again quoting from the report. Fortunately, this is a waterfall and cliff specialist, so it really depends on those water dripping down from the waterfall, so at least it will be protected from livestock grazing, which is a major concern in this area. Now, using this species data in combination with the match data, we can see that overall, in the whole plantation, that there's really good management of the invasive alien plant species. I can't tell you from the match data whether that applies to the specific river that's feeding into the waterfall where this gladiolus occurs, but it's encouraging. Then fire management is also doing good. This was too frequent fire was raised as a concern by David Stiles, specifically for that Leucospermum species, which there are some taxonomic issues. There are only a few populations in KwaZulu-Natal, and they might be taxonomically distinct from the other populations in Swaziland and Mpumalanga. And then for livestock grazing, I mean, it's not a surprise. but they are at 22% of best practice. That's horrible. And because of the land claimants in the area, you can't do too much. I mean, there are options, but it's hard. So just based on what we know of these pressures in the landscape, and I might add these unmanaged pressures in the grassland area, this is the kind of trend that you can expect just based on past research. It's not based on real data. This is simulated, I should add. And now I can make a decision whether you want to intervene or can intervene or not. So just in conclusion, monitoring is more than counting species. Okay? The importance of management actions, I think I've illustrated here. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's very hard, but I think it's necessary. And then especially with these land claims and stuff coming through, I think it's clear that the social ecological system that we are in is changing, and we should adapt to that. And then the ecological monitoring, I think, is a very real and very valuable safety net to ensure that the management actions that we implement remain valid in a changing environment.